if you're into the whole concept or game of self-development, self-improvement, then you might have heard of Elliot Hulse. Now, Elliot Hulse talks a lot about the initiation from boyhood to manhood. And he actually tells stories about how our ancestors, our great-great-grandparents and the ones before those would be thrown into forms of initiations that would transform them from boys to men. First of all, what is an initiation? You can consider an initiation to be a catalyst of growth. So to give you an example of initiations that we have in this day and age, we have breakups from girlfriends, right? That's an initiation that forces you to transform into somebody else. You have initiations in the form of pain and trauma. So you might have a really bad physical injury, and that forces you again to adapt to the situation, which means you grow as an individual. You might have an argument with a friend, or you might fall out with somebody. Something that happens in your life to trigger growth that forces you to become somebody different is an initiation. Now, our ancestors did not have the access to technology that we do today. They were living completely different lives. In fact, life maybe 1500, 2000 years ago was completely different, unimaginable to life now. And we have to consider ourselves as fortunate people, fortunate human beings, in order to have the things we have. The access to technology that we have today is something that our ancestors couldn't even have dreamt of. Elliot Hulse talks about how our ancestors, these men who came before us, these men who lived completely different lives than we do today, would have to go through forms of initiations that would turn them from boys to men. And in fact, one of the stories is a boy around the age of, I think it's 12, would be blindfolded by his father and his grandfather, and they would lead him into a forest in the middle of nowhere, an unknown location to the boy, and they would leave him there, and they would tell him that he's not allowed to take the blindfold off for a certain amount of time, and they would leave, right? After the boy had finished counting so many seconds, he would take off his blindfold and he would have to find his way home, bearing in mind he was in the middle of nowhere. He would have no food, he would have no water. And what his father and his grandparents would say to him is that if you can't make your way home, boy, you're not man enough to be part of the family. That's an example of one of the initiations that our ancestors would have to go through as boys to turn them into men. And when the boy would arrive home, he would receive congratulations and thanks and cheers from all his family, right? It's like, well done. Now you're a man. Welcome to the tribe. There are many other examples of initiations that turned our ancestors from boys into men, many that I can't list, but I just wanted to give you one for an example. So in this day and age, what initiations do we have as boys turning into men? What initiations or catalysts do we have that forces us to grow, forces us to adapt into new and better, more evolved individuals? Well, I haven't certainly been taken into a forest and blindfolded by any of my parents, right? I'm pretty sure you haven't either. There are many other examples of initiations, and one that's just popped into my mind is that a boy would have to fight a wild animal, for example. And if he was eaten or damaged by that wild animal, then he failed his initiation from boyhood to manhood. Other forms of initiations were things like hunting. There are many examples. In fact, you can research these online if you want to. There are many books as well. Why I mention initiations is because in this generation, in this day and age, we seem to have lost the spark that turns us from boys into men. That drive, that push, that ambition. And part of this is because of the access to technology that we have. Part of this is because we have evolved as human beings, and so life on Earth is completely different to what it would have been maybe 1500, 2000, 3000, 5000 years ago. Right? The lives that our ancestors were living, once again, are completely different to the lives that we're living now. However, you can find an initiation for yourself that transforms you from a boy to a man. And one of those initiations is NoFap. Right? As crazy as it sounds, NoFap is actually an initiation, something that turns you from a boy to a man. Now, you may ask, how does that work? Look, first of all, understand that pornography and masturbation is detrimental to your health. Secondly, understand that the addiction to pornography and masturbation is a lot more severe than you have ever been led to believe. And thirdly, if you can overcome an addiction to pornography and masturbation, then you are extremely magnificent in terms of your being and your capabilities, because once again, it is very difficult to overcome an addiction to PMO. So you can force yourself to grow, you can force yourself to evolve, you can force yourself to become a better individual, a better man by doing something like NoFap. It's like self-initiation, right? We don't have grandparents, fathers and grandparents taking us into forests and rainforests with blindfolds on and leaving us there, right? We don't have to fight wild animals anymore, we don't have to hunt. We seem to have lost those things that turn us into men. However, you can force this upon yourself. If you're ready to transition from boyhood to manhood, you can try something like NoFap. And once again, if you're successful at it, if you challenge yourself, and if you actually do well, then what you are doing is forcing growth upon yourself. You're turning yourself into a man, right? And that's why I've titled this video, NoFap Turning You from a Boy to a Man. How NoFap is an initiation from boyhood to manhood. Divine Masculine Tantra. I hope to see you on the next video.